Hi, this is Jason from Sonoran Music Devices coming to you from the Sonoran Desert, USA. This is basically a video manual, although it is not a replacement for the PDF manual that ships with Javelina. If the pace of this video is too slow or too fast, then consider adjusting the playback speed with YouTube's settings. Also note the chapter links in the description section. Support is provided via the email address listed in the PDF manual. Before we get into the details, here is a quick demonstration of what Javelina is capable of. Here I have a live set with a drum track and a synth track. First, watch how I use Javelina to stutter the drum track by mashing buttons on a MIDI controller. Next, watch how I use Javelina to stutter the synth track by mashing buttons on a MIDI controller. Finally, watch how I use Javelina to stutter both the drum and synth tracks together. What I am essentially doing is playing multiple instances of Ableton Live's Beat Repeat effect in the same way one would play the delay control feature of a popular Swedish hardware device commonly abbreviated as OT. Of course, this playing can also be recorded, edited, and sequenced using Ableton Live's native features. What is Javelina? Javelina is an Ableton Max For Live solution which provides control of up to 8 groups of Ableton Beat Repeat effects, grid, and repeat parameters anywhere in a live set via a single MIDI track's live or recorded incoming notes. The number of beat repeats controlled by each group is essentially unlimited or only limited by what your computer can handle, which is probably more than you would need. For example, consider this live clip. The notes in this live clip control the grid and repeat parameters of each respective beat repeat effect for which Javelina is configured. The notes in the G1 group control beat repeat effects targeted by that group. The notes in the G2 group control beat repeat effects targeted by that group, and so on. In short, notes on one track control beat repeat effects on other tracks, and parameter values are applied until a new note is received. The reason why there are 8 groups is so that you can control groups of beat repeats. For example, suppose you have a drum track, a sample track, and a synth track. One group containing one Javelina device can control the drum track. Another group containing one Javelina device can control the sample track. Another group containing one Javelina device can control the synth track. And another group containing 3 Javelina devices can control all 3 tracks at the same time. Controlling multiple tracks at the same time with Javelina is the same effect as having beat repeat sit on a bus track. However, placing beat repeat on a bus track is often not viable due to a problem with Live's delay compensation. Javelina addresses that problem, and it will be discussed later in this video. Javelina supports the following values for beat repeat's grid parameter: 1/2, 1/4, 1/8, 1/16, 1/32, 1/6, and 1/3. Javelina offers an ultra-smooth workflow. The user interface is minimal as it leverages Ableton Live's native interface and tools to manage user input. In other words, it just works. A lot of care was taken to make Javelina stable and easy to use. You will probably spend a few minutes setting up your project and then never think about it again. Javelina works well with Ableton Push, but Ableton Push is not required to use Javelina. What can you do with Javelina? As I showed earlier, you can play beat repeat. That is, you can stutter or repeat 8 groups of program material by mashing buttons like the delay control feature of a popular Swedish hardware device commonly abbreviated as OT. By using Javelina delay, discussed later, you can dial in the responsiveness of beat repeat's playability. You can also address the aforementioned delay compensation problem. That is, Live does not latency compensate devices that depend on Live's transport, and beat repeat depends on Live's transport. To illustrate the aforementioned delay compensation problem, here I have a simple live set containing one audio track and one audio clip. On that track are 2 effects, a beat repeat and an external audio effect with its hardware latency parameter set to 200 milliseconds, which means that external audio effect induces 200 milliseconds of latency. Notice how the external audio effect sits after or to the right of beat repeat. The audio clip has automation which triggers beat repeat on the fourth beat. After I hit play, you will hear the program material stutter on the fourth beat as expected. Now I will simply move the external audio effect before beat repeat. Nothing else has changed. After I hit play, you will hear the program material is no longer being stuttered on the fourth beat, which clearly demonstrates beat repeat is not delay compensated. That lack of delay compensation is usually not a problem on individual tracks, because on those tracks you can simply place beat repeat before any latency-inducing devices. However, it can be a problem where beat repeat sits on bus tracks that exist in a signal path after latency-inducing devices. Javelina addresses that problem by allowing you to place beat repeat effects on multiple tracks before latency-inducing devices and then control them from a single place as if they were a single beat repeat sitting on a bus track. Why did I create Javelina? 1. Playing groups of beat repeats is awesome. 2. I love the OT, and I wanted to have the OT's delay control capabilities and their associated playability available in Ableton Live. 3. I wanted to address the delay compensation problem described earlier. How does Javelina work from a high level? Javelina audio effect devices, which are just beat repeats with a macro mapping, sit on tracks, and they are controlled by Javelina control devices. Javelina control devices respond to notes in live clips or live input from a MIDI controller. You can add Javelina to as many tracks as your computer can handle. Installation. Copy the Sonoran Music Devices folder to your Ableton user library. Do not add, remove, or change anything inside of the Sonoran Music Devices folder. What's included? The Sonoran Music Devices folder contains a folder called Javelina, which contains components, Javelina delay, Javelina drum rack, Javelina repeater control, Javelina repeater, and the manual. Components contains the repeater control.amxd and delay.amxd max for live devices. Javelina delay is a MIDI effect with one parameter, delay time. It will be discussed later in this video. Javelina drum rack is a live drum rack device which is mostly just a visual aid. It will be discussed later in this video. Javelina repeater control is a MIDI effect. It will be discussed later in this video. Javelina repeater is an audio effect which is controlled by Javelina repeater control. It is just a beat repeat effect with a macro mapping. It will be discussed later in this video. Setup. The following instructions will set up Javelina on 2 tracks. Group 1 will control a Javelina repeater device on a track called Program 1. Group 2 will control a Javelina repeater device on a track called Program 2. Group 3 will control separate Javelina repeater devices on both Program 1 and Program 2 tracks. Here I have prepared a new live set. It contains 3 tracks, an empty MIDI track called Javelina Control and 2 audio tracks with some program material. 1. On the Javelina Control track, add the following devices in this left to right order: Javelina delay, Javelina repeater control, and Javelina drum rack. 2. On the Program 1 track, A. Add the Javelina repeater device and name it G1. B. Add another Javelina repeater device and name it G3. 3. On the Program 2 track, A. Add the Javelina repeater device and name it G2. B. Add another Javelina repeater device and name it G3. 4. In Live's browser, from the Sonoran Music Devices, Javelina, Components folder, drag repeater control.amxd onto the Drop MIDI Effects Here section of the Group 1 repeaters chain of the Repeater Group 1 chain of the Javelina repeater control device. The Drop MIDI Effects Here section now contains a chain called Repeater Control. Rename the Repeater Control chain to G1. 5. Repeat the previous step, except replace the words Group 1 with Group 2 and G1 with G2. 6. Repeat the previous step, except replace the words Group 2 with Group 3 and G2 with G3. 7. Repeat the previous step again. Setup is now complete. Unless you want to add more tracks, you never need to perform the setup process again. You can create template live sets with Javelina already set up and ready to go, and I recommend you do that. Note, you can group and move Javelina tracks as you see fit and name them whatever you want. You can name the repeater group 1 through 8 chains in Javelina repeater control whatever you want. You can move Javelina repeater devices after they are set up. You can remove Javelina repeater devices and Javelina repeater control devices if you no longer want them in your live set. You can rename a repeater control.amxd chain to bind it to a different Javelina repeater device. Do not modify or rename Javelina repeater devices after they are set up. Do not move repeater control.amxd devices or chains after they are set up. Do not rebind a Javelina repeater device. If you want to do that, then remove the Javelina repeater device and add a new one. Do not add Javelina repeater devices after latency-inducing devices due to the delay compensation problem discussed earlier. However, in practice, a tiny amount of latency might not be a problem. How to use Javelina. There are 2 ways to use Javelina: performance mode and sequence mode. We will cover both modes using example tracks discussed in the setup section. Performance mode. In performance mode, playing notes on the Javelina control track will cause the corresponding Javelina control devices to change their targeted Javelina repeater effects. Using performance mode. 1. Arm the Javelina control track. 2. Hit play. 3. Play some of the Group 1 pads on the Javelina drum rack device. Notice the G1 Javelina repeater device on the Program 1 track is being changed. Four, play some of the Group 2 pads on the Javelina drum rack device. Notice the G2 Javelina repeater device on the Program 2 track is being changed. Five, play some of the Group 3 pads on the Javelina drum rack device. Notice the G3 Javelina repeater devices on both Program 1 and Program 2 tracks are being changed. Six, optionally set the delay time parameter of Javelina delay. Javelina delay. When Javelina repeater control receives incoming notes, it activates, inside of Javelina repeat, Beat Repeat's repeat parameter and sets the Beat Repeat grid parameter value that corresponds to the incoming note. Activating Beat Repeat's repeat parameter causes Beat Repeat to immediately capture program material and play repetitions according to the grid parameter until repeat is deactivated. The implication of that is the program material you want to repeat must happen a little before the repeat parameter is activated. Since it is challenging and unintuitive to play Javelina drum rack notes just after the program material you want to repeat, I included Javelina delay to address that problem. Javelina delay is a simple MIDI delay. It delays incoming MIDI notes by the amount of its delay time parameter. Adding a delay to incoming MIDI notes means you can play Javelina drum rack naturally in time. Incoming MIDI notes will then be delayed so that Beat Repeat is triggered a little after the program material you want to capture, and it will feel right. In my testing, I found delay time values of 50 to 70 milliseconds to be a sweet spot. You might consider disabling Javelina delay when using sequenced mode, but in practice, I found that to be unnecessary when delay time was set closer to 50 milliseconds. The sweet spot probably depends on the tempo and the program material. Experiment to see what works best for you. Sequenced mode. Sequenced mode is the same as performance mode, except instead of playing Javelina drum rack, notes and live clips on the Javelina control track control their corresponding Javelina repeater devices. As mentioned earlier, you may wish to disable the Javelina delay device on the Javelina control track when using sequenced mode. Experiment to see what works best for you. Javelina drum rack. Javelina drum rack's notes contain 8 groups. The functions of each note are identical in each group. Green notes indicate default values. The first yellow note of each group triggers that group's 1/2 grid interval. The second yellow note of each group triggers that group's 1/4 grid interval. The third yellow note of each group triggers that group's 1/8 grid interval. The fourth yellow note of each group triggers that group's 1/16 grid interval. The fifth yellow note of each group triggers that group's 1/32 grid interval. The sixth yellow note of each group triggers that group's 1/6 grid interval. And the seventh yellow note of each group triggers that group's 1/3 grid interval. Note, Ableton Push is not required to use Javelina. Frequently asked questions. Why is it hard to trigger Javelina in time? Consider setting a delay time value as described in the Performance Mode section. Wrap up. Okay, that is all for now. Thank you for watching.